Hello, everybody, and welcome to this panel. I'm going to get all the way through the title, I swear. The Power of YouTube and Superstar Apps, Unlocking the Power of Brands, Programming, and Monetization. So that means we're literally going to talk about everything, so that should be fun. We've got an amazing panel right here that comes from a lot of different sectors of the digital video world or just digital influencer world. Talent, talent representation, brands, claiming. So get those questions ready. We're going to end the panel with about 15 minutes for Q&A, unless we just get on a roll. But at any time, if there's something very pressing, we'll keep it casual since it's a pretty small room, so just raise your hand if you want clarification. Cool, so let's start with a short intro for everybody on the panel, and we'll start with Jake here.
Hi guys, how are you? I don't know if my microphone is on. My name is Jake Katz, head of strategy for Trailer Park. Has anybody here heard of Trailer Park? So, entertainment marketing agency, and we work with entertainment clients from traditional to streaming platforms to the movie studio. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Adam?
Hi, I'm Adam Goldstein, SVP of Business Development for Zephyr. We're a technology company that classifies video on social platforms, particularly YouTube and Facebook. And then we help advertisers target content at the video level. And we help content owners have control and knowledge of it. So we work with the film studios and the music labels, TV networks, so on and so forth.
Great. James?
I'm James Norrell. I'm the VP of Social Video Strategy at Fullscreen. I work in the Video Labs department where we manage the YouTube channels and Facebook pages of brands and media companies.
Cool. Leanne?
Hi guys, my name's Leanne Parise. My company is called Music Brand Agency, and our passion is understanding culture and its effect on society, and we represent talent for their brand endorsements and campaign opportunities.
Great. And George?
My name is George Ozunian. I'm also known as the pseudonym Maddox. I'm an author and content creator on YouTube and many different formats and platforms.
Fantastic. Great. So yeah, I mean, a big part of what we're talking about is how brands, whoa, I feel like this just got louder, how brands and monetization can happen on these social platforms. So we'll start with a big question and then we'll narrow down as we go, but it feels like the big talk that's happening right now is about to what extent content on social platforms can be considered brand safe. We've seen a lot of stories over the past 2 years about adpocalypses and I won't specifically name any talent, but you've all read the headlines about people who have come out with a video that was objectionable, hundreds of millions of dollars of brands pull out. So I'll leave this open to everybody. Does it still make sense for brands to jump into social video?
No.
That was unexpected.
No, absolutely. I think what I would just say to set the tone is now more than ever, I think we all market in a time where you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like nobody is safe. It's not your branded content in social that's going to get you in trouble. I think because consumers have a megaphone louder than ever before, so you can't opt out of it. I think that it's just more or less about participating in culture, being present where consumers are, where other marketers are. But just the days of being overly safe and sort of controlling everything about your brand perception are totally gone.
I also think it's interesting to look at, a lot of this happened last year with the brand safety aspect of things, and that was also a year where YouTube posted more watch time growth than any of the previous years. They usually boast, around 50% watch time growth year over year. Last year it was 60%. So at a time where there was supposed to be turmoil, there were brands pausing their media spends. The platform itself still made a lot of money and still had a lot of eyeballs on it. So,
our opinion is similar in kind of building up what you were saying. Our opinion. I was talking to one of our brand clients the other day, who's both a toy maker, consumer products, but also creates a lot of content. And there's definitely discomfort there. To your point, there's a lot of folks that are uncomfortable with what's going on these platforms, and this person was referencing Facebook specifically. What we talked about, and the point we were making with him, was that engaging with the platform in some ways didn't necessarily mean condoning what was going on there, but if you aren't working on it, or at least having knowledge of what's going on in some form or fashion, that's going to be a disadvantage in the long run. I think now's the time to work on these platforms, and that doesn't necessarily mean advertising on it or creating content specifically for it. It could just mean knowing what's happening with your product, whether that's an actual piece of merchandise or content on a platform, and purely even just having knowledge about what's going on and how, because whether you like it or not, fans and users are going to talk about your brand or your product. And so we think it's important at least to have knowledge of it. And from there, you see what you're comfortable with and you dip your toes in the water, but otherwise you'll be left behind.
I've noticed an interesting trend. I think that brands are on a 3 to 5 year lag behind culture. And what I mean by that is, recently there was a shooting at YouTube. It's very unfortunate, and I did a live stream coverage of that, a live news stream coverage of that, which was immediately demonetized because I talked about gun violence and I talked about this massacre, while simultaneously CNN did as well on YouTube, exact same story, exact same coverage. Theirs was monetized. I feel like I don't feel that it was necessarily unfair, because CNN has a reputation and has built that reputation and trust with brands over time. So I think that algorithmically, if they're, brands are trying to decide which people to sponsor, who are they going to go with? CNN with a trusted reputation, or some guy named Maddox who's doing a live stream maybe for the first time? So that 3 to 5 year lag is my estimation on how long it'll take for brands to start coming around and realize that this is the new medium, this is the new normal.
This is a huge question, but where would I start with this? I think when you impact culture, you take a risk. You take a risk of how it could go, but if you're confident in your message and you're confident in the influencers and the celebrities that you choose to represent that message, and you're dialed in, you can control the impact you want it to have. But I think brands need to take those risks, and if they want to get the message that they want to be delivered to their audience, they need to take that. They need to take opportunities to be outspoken, but it could go either way, like Pepsi and Kendall Jenner. That was a huge problem, and you saw it again with H&M. You saw it again with H&M and how one little mistake, is detrimental to the Black community. I had a client who passed on a really big deal after that happened because he couldn't take the risk of the backlash that it could have on his career. So I think, when you are forward thinking, there's going to be the possibility of your brand message going the wrong way, but you have to be careful. You have to be in that from the inception to the execution of the deal on the brand side and the talent side. It's really just about following through with the deals. A lot of the times, executives will be at the top of the chain coming up with this creative concept, and then they'll just hand it off. And I think it has to be a more hands-on process with the talent and the brand through execution.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got a saying over at Mob Crush, because we work with gamers and in live, which are both seen as risky areas, but we say, well, somebody's buying against Walking Dead, right? So there's definitely ad space for everybody. Let's narrow it down to James and Adam. Both of you, Zephyr and Fullscreen, both kind of juggernauts in the branded, where brands meet influencer space or brands meet UGC content space. But a lot of brands that we've talked to in the past, they just don't even know where to start. So if there's a brand or an agency person out there who said, cool, I want to start a social initiative, I just don't even know who to talk to, where should they start?
That's not really how I interpreted the question.
Oh, fair. Well, however you want to interpret it.
From a campaign basis, obviously you have to look at what your KPIs are, but when we're looking at kind of building a brand on YouTube or building a YouTube channel and an audience, it's the idea of, most brands or media companies that come to us already have a channel. So the first thing that we do is we look at the right-hand rail. We look at that suggested video module on YouTube. If you're watching a video, that right-hand side. A lot of people don't know that right-hand side is actually responsible for 60% of platform traffic. It's not search. It's nothing else. From an algorithmic perspective, about 85% of your YouTube traffic is coming from YouTube suggesting your content in one way or another. And you can learn a lot about your channel and your content based on what you see on that right-hand rail. YouTube's supposed to give you 4 slots. If you see less than that, there's something wrong. If you see more than that, that means you're starting to resonate a little bit with the algorithm. If you see that the content that's beating you is longer than the content that you're posting, that's because we know YouTube favors watch time. If you're seeing that you own all of the right-hand rail, maybe you need to be posting more content and you have more opportunities out in the space. So that's my YouTube nerd answer to where to start.
Great. We have a similar way of looking at things, I think, in that everything we do is kind of data-led first. When we work, because we work with the big movie studios and TV networks and many large brands, I like to think we're never going to have as great of a hold on think about content or branded content as both art and science. I don't think that we're ever going to have as good of a hold on the art piece of it as our clients will. I like to bring in kind of the science part of that with them and help them from that way. So we look at everything data-led. So what we like to do oftentimes, whether it's a brand, whether it's a toy company, as I mentioned earlier, or even a film studio that doesn't have a great presence, we start by looking at how fans and users are engaging with those brands or products in the first place. 9 times out of 10, maybe 9.9 times out of 10, the users and fans out there have talked about, have used, have remixed the product for anyone we're working with in some form or fashion. We often find a good way to start. And then there are some other those kind of tactics and tips and tricks with anything existing. But we like to start from what users have done, start there, and then look at the zeitgeist of the other demographic that they're trying to reach. We have a whole group of folks that are really just data nerds, and we lovingly call fanthropologists, that really just understand user and fan culture on platforms. So we look at it from a data-led perspective, and then from there, it's a lot of getting buy-in from our customers, and then a lot of testing, a lot of trial and error, and A/B and C and D and E and F testing, and we go from there.
Right. And have you seen that a lot of the brands and publishers you've worked with have been receptive to letting science dictate their art to a certain extent, or at the very least get that feedback?
It's a totally mixed bag. It's a great question. And some of it is building trust, but what we always tell the folks that we work with is we're going to tell you what we really think is right and the right thing to do, knowing full well that half of what we might suggest might get shot down by your colleagues or your boss or the CEO because you're not ready for it, because there is discomfort. But we're still going to be the truth tellers. So it's a totally mixed bag. Mm-hmm. Some have more freedom than others also, just depending on, as I keep talking about this toy company, but when you deal with kids as customers, that might be a lot different than if you're AMC, who's a client of ours, and you can be a lot more liberal with the Walking Dead content than you can other.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, Jake and Leanne, so both of you have worked a lot with brands, publishers, movie studios. I know on Instagram a lot of it is driven by brands. But it seems like the way people have measured success, those goalposts have been changing a lot, especially over the past 5 years. So what have you seen in terms of trends of how brands measure success?
Well, in our world, I guess I can speak more to ancillary content that is promotional. So is it driving eyeballs back to the mothership or website traffic, or is it being consumed in full? But I think as we work with different streaming platforms like Facebook Watch or YouTube Red, the way they look at success for an ancillary piece of content can be like a meaningful start. Like, did they just get through the first 3 seconds? Did they subscribe to the channel or the show page? But again, a lot of our presence on social is dictated by what you're trying to do versus just that they watch the video fully all the way through. Mm-hmm. So in our world, success definitely is, did we create that fear of missing out in front of the paywall and convert subscribers behind it? Did we stop them in their scroll and get them to watch the first 3 seconds? But it really varies for every platform, which is quite different than I think someone like George on the end, who's sort of focused on channel and his own proprietary content.
Sure. Leanne?
Well, it's funny because I think that you could look at it from both sides. So success from the talent side and success from the brand side. So success in the talent side might be different than success in the brand side because they need to look at it more quantitatively, like did our spend get us the results that we need, while my clients are looking at it like did my fans engage with my content? Was their conversation created? Was there an impact in my audience? And do they want more? So typically, and honestly speaking, a lot of the brands, most of the time, from my personal experience, will just say, can you send us the back end? Can you send us the Instagram swipe ups? How much views did it get? Can you send us the back end on the social media, on the Instagram post? How much engagement, how much likes? But then taking it a step further, like success in my opinion is, did my client enjoy the campaign? Did they enjoy working with me? Did they enjoy working with my company? And like, if it did well, what can we do more? So I represent a lot of digital talent. Digital talent, there's many different sectors of influencers. So there's premium content creators, there's beauty and lifestyle, there's so many different categories. So it's, when you talk about success with, let's say, a lifestyle client, I recently did a campaign with Tumi Luggage and Halt Look, and it was there was 2 posts of the campaign. Sorry, I'm being specific, but I want to give an actual example. And the second post was a giveaway, and my client was able to give her fans a Tumi set of luggage. And it created so much engagement, and it was so amazing to see her fans interact with the posts. And she got 5 times the engagement she typically gets because there was something that her fans could react to. So we came up with something where we're like, now let's do a monthly giveaway because she gets sent so much products from brands. Let's just create a package and keep this going. So for us, it was a success, and for the brand, they loved it. And then the person who won was so ecstatic, and we actually reposted her. And to me, like, that's a successful campaign. Yeah. There was interaction, there was happiness, there was an impactful moment. And there was conversation. And I think that's the most important thing, is, are you creating a conversation? A lot of times brands look at these influencers on a media spend basis where they're like, okay, Amex, we want 200 influencers. They can't change the copy of the caption. They can't do this and that. So it's really just like, okay, they're a distribution channel. You're buying an ad on their page, and that's fine for us if we want the dollar, but it doesn't really do anything for the audience at all.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, at the end of the day, there's still an audience that has to watch it and decide whether or not they like your brand, right?
Yeah, I mean, personally, like, just to like wrap it up, it's like, I always look at things as a consumer, as someone who's observing the culture and of Instagram and social media, and then how can I like take my knowledge and what I like to see, and how do I translate that into my clients and the campaigns we work on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I ask a follow-up question? You're doing a great job. I don't want to step on
your
toes. Thank
you. No, by all means. I appreciate the compliment.
This is actually really interesting. I want to just ask a follow-up maybe to you, Leanne and George. Are you finding, because I think we all know, like, a couple years ago, brands were just maybe tracking views. How many views did it get? And then it was more about engagements. And now, I'm curious, are brands, ultimately, I would think most of these brands are actually trying to sell product or create goodwill to buy product. Are they starting to ask for, or are there ways to now track? I honestly don't know the answer to this. Are there ways to now track, did fans of your client then go buy the Tumi handbag or the luggage? Or are brands starting to ask for those things, like pure, really direct response sales figures?
I would just say, like, on Instagram stories, like, I am obsessed with utilizing stories as a way to extend a campaign that lives on a social media feed, because you could see how many people swipe up, and you can see the links of how many people clicked that link and went to the website. So it's an actual, like, real result of how many people care. And as a consumer, when I watch people that I care about, I always swipe up if there's someone I follow. So I think, did I answer your question? Yeah, I think like swipe ups are a really good way.
Yeah, every brand is interested in an ROI, and they track that usually with a custom code or direct links from whatever campaign that they're doing. They do watch that information. They do track that pretty closely, and they're also very keenly aware of gaming the system as well. Some content creators try to do it a dishonest way. They'll try to bump up engagement artificially by saying, "Hey, click on this link in my description, whatever, and you'll have a chance to win an Amazon gift card." But they're doing that to artificially inflate the click-throughs for another campaign using the bait of an Amazon gift card. Well, that's super easy to track because you simply look at the click-through rate versus the conversion rate. And there's a huge discrepancy, and that's usually a sign that somebody's trying to game the system. But yeah, brands are definitely keenly aware of ROI.
I think they're getting more smart too as the years go on, because before we even engage in a campaign, most brands will ask for demographics and where their users are, what the age base is, and So there's definitely a lot more vetting than I've seen, in the beginning. I remember I did my first social media post when Instagram first launched, and it was for a $500 post on Instagram. And, I kind of educated the company I was working with on how to price it. Mm-hmm. So I think as everything grows, like, people get smarter.
Yeah. Yeah, and the data's getting better, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've even seen it with the upgrade in YouTube analytics with impressions data, and harder to game all the time, which actually that's a good time to move over to George, as Frontline's content creator on the panel. So, I mean, you've been on, I remember watching you on YouTube a while back, so you've been through it.
Yeah.
But naturally the last 2 years, I feel like YouTube has caught the national attention in a way that it hasn't in the past. Like, it's always been a platform that's been valuable, it's what the kids are watching. But now it's like front page headlines when there's a scandal, and there's stars that are, that are really making social impact to the point where people's parents have heard of it, right? So it's a bit more ubiquitous. But that's also affected monetization greatly. So I would love to just kind of get your feel for the state of the union as it pertains to how creators actually make money in this world.
Yeah, so Plan A can no longer be advertisement. It's just the reality we live in today, because your channel can get demonetized at a whim, and there are scandals that break out on YouTube, rivals who start to do flag campaigns to try to get a different creator's channel demonetized or taken down. So that's no longer Plan A for a lot of people. I predicted that a long time ago and started putting my own pre-rolls for my own merch right at the top of my videos. And that way I figured, well, if my channel ever got demonetized, at least there's something that I'm driving traffic to monetize it. I think more and more, and this is why I said earlier, if you guys are just joining us, there was a 3 to 5 year lag in culture between brands and how they're going to start adapting to the YouTube content creators. I think the new normal is that a lot of content creators are moving towards getting direct funding from their fans. So that seems to be by far, I've done streams before, like live news streams, where I did like a 10-minute stream and got $200 just directly from fan support, because they just wanted to, they really appreciated the news being brought to them by somebody that they trust and look up to. As opposed to that same stream monetized through the traditional ad rate, I think is like $1.50 CPM, which translated to something like $8. So the monetization has completely shifted from, I think, ads to merch and sponsorship. And to the point about sponsorship and getting an ROI, nothing speaks more towards conversion than an authentic endorsement. And I have had sponsors, and it really doesn't take much to follow up. If anyone in the audience, I don't know if anyone in the audience is from brands, representing any kind of brands or anything like that, but it doesn't take much. It just takes following up with the creator to make sure they're using your product or service. And if they enjoy it, which I have with all the products and sponsors I've promoted, I see a huge uptick in sponsorship, because when I talk about it, it is coming from a place of joy. It is coming from a place of use. Like, I actually like the thing that I'm endorsing. I never endorse anything that I don't like, and it's counterproductive to the sponsor. I mean, there's some, I think, I don't know if dishonest is the word, but creators who will take the money and promote something but kind of do a half-assed job of it. And that does nobody any favors, because they're basically poisoning the well for future creators and that brand.
Yeah, well, you saw it. There was recently a mini scandal that came out where, I forget the name of the company, but somebody who wrote your term paper for you. And a bunch of YouTubers did these sponsorships, and then YouTube just banned it from the platform. They said, no, this is clearly not something that's good for kids, or like they just wanted the company to go away. And a lot of YouTubers had to kind of eat it a little bit, because they went, oh, I actually took the money. I had no clue what it was. I'm sorry about that, right? But yeah, so it's good to actually find people that love your product. But let's talk a little bit more about brands and ways that they can monetize. So many brands are kind of in this direct response world, right? I have something I want to sell. I want to get an influencer to say you should go buy it, and then people go out and buy it, right? But now we're starting to see more people focusing on awareness campaigns or longer-term influencer deals where somebody is really integrating into the stuff that they're making. So I'd just love to hear if there's any interesting trends that anyone on the panel has seen in terms of how you can work with influencers or social platforms on getting your message out in a smarter way.
I mean, from our standpoint in the business of marketing entertainment, Is my microphone on?
It's on. I think you're just quiet.
Hey, all right. Testing. Los Angeles. Basically, in our world of marketing entertainment, an idea we're playing with is actually a bit of a riff on what you've been saying, George, which is brands. There is this lag between how creators behave and how brands understand social media. And even this, I don't know if you picked up on one insight he said, which is stepping away from ad-supported model, going straight to consumer, which is totally where the cable industry is headed. And thinking about breaking out of bundles and going straight to consumer. So our belief is, yes, creators are influential and great reach vehicles, but we also believe that they're most untapped for their expertise when it comes to how to market in social. So thinking about creators or video experts as an extension of our strategy process, that they're not necessarily just a reach channel, but also experts in how do you do pre-roll, how do you push to website traffic, how do you cross-promote in different ways across platforms. And I don't think everybody really always appreciates that. Now that we're in this world of so many creators that feels a little turnkey just to throw your product on their page, but how about involving them in your process of, and even these guys in the panel with Zephyr and a full screen, just that expertise of how a creator uses social media, that is the blueprint for brands. We just have to pay closer attention to it.
I was also, when you think about when is the time to monetize in the Video Labs world, we have a lot of brands come to us who have a channel that has 20,000 subscribers, and they're like, oh, and we want to eventually have our content that we're creating support all of our advertising. And we're like, well, you kind of have to build an audience before you can really truly monetize them. And that's sort of an interesting conversation to explore with them, where it's like you need to get up to 500,000 subscribers before you're really driving enough money to fund some of your content initiatives. And also, a lot of our media partners, a lot of the television studios and even theatrical companies that we work with have just, to your point of being 3 to 5 years behind, which might be the tagline of this panel at this point. They just started monetizing their content, and some of them are direct selling it. Some of them are letting YouTube sell it, and they're seeing a lot of traction. It probably doesn't really have a measurable impact on their bottom line if they're making a couple $1 million off of YouTube when they're a multi-billion-dollar company in revenue. But they're starting to learn, and they're starting to sell and incorporate it into their packages, into their .com packages, and it's been very interesting over the last about year and a half seeing them start to actually aggressively monetize their content, and as a result start to care more about YouTube and Facebook and these social platforms, less as a marketing initiative and more as a potential incubator or revenue source down the line.
I'm just kind of curious that by show of hands, how many in the audience are related to brand or representing branding? Okay, just a couple. Okay, I think that this is a huge opportunity coming up for a brand to be impervious to internet bullshit. And what I mean by that is the adpocalypse happened, right? And that was for those who don't know, the Wall Street Journal kind of picked out some pieces of one of the biggest YouTubers, PewDiePie, and tried to make the case that it was kind of sympathetic towards fascism and things like that. It was ludicrous. People didn't abandon PewDiePie, rightly so, but a lot of advertisers did, and those advertisers, I think, if I'm being a little bit cynical here, are direct competitors to YouTube. They were Comcast, AT&T, big telecom corps that are cable providers, and they're competing for content and eyeballs and views, and cable is really hurting right now. So for those advertisers to be the first to pull their ads, I think is if you want to be cynical, I think that's a way of looking at kind of a shady way of going about competition, competing with your competitors.
Even the Wall Street Journal, that broke the article, is a competitor. Their
that's
parent
right.
company is owned.
That's correct. That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. The Wall Street
There was
Journal.
a whole storyline of where this originated.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm glad you brought that up. So I think that this leaves a huge opportunity for a internet-safe brand. The brands are always looking for brand-safe creators, but if you create a creator-safe brand, I think that's something that the entire internet will rally around, and it's a huge opportunity right now. If some creator comes out and is kind of, look, if you advertise on the internet It's the nature of the beast that you're occasionally going to see your content, your brand, juxtaposed next to something that you don't like. And you have to approach those piecemeal and hope that it doesn't happen very often. But to have this kind of approach where it's like, well, we don't want anything with any kind of, say, for example, vulgarities, colorful language or anything like that, you're alienating a huge swath of the internet and the way real people talk and produce content. If you are able to manage your brand in such a way that you appear like a hero to these content creators and the internet at large, it's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you've already seen it with the huge rise in some internet-first companies. I mean, Dollar Shave Club is one that comes to mind. The way Uber, Lyft has been playing along with the internet really well.
Wendy's is doing great.
Wendy's is great. Blue Apron even. Like, you can't go on the internet without hearing about Blue Apron, and that company is growing like crazy. So I think that's a great point. So we've talked a lot about major platforms, right? We've talked a lot about the YouTubes and the Facebooks of the world. But part of the title of this is also and superstar apps. So we've seen a lot of apps pop recently that have started to get some buzz. Should we be paying attention to any of those, specifically, say, Musical.ly, LiveMe, even to some extent Snapchat, even though it's part of the public consciousness, but a lot of brands have been hesitant to jump on? Are these still valuable places to invest time?
Yeah, follow me on Vero.
People are still on Vero? That's
I mean, I think that's a microcosm of an app that just was born and died in a week.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we haven't seen that since Meerkat, right?
Yeah, and I think that makes it scary for people to jump in because they don't want to invest too much in something that might not be there literally the same day next week.
I just think it's important to understand the audience of each platform. Like, Musical.ly is very, very young. So if your campaign is focused on 8-year-olds to 16-year-olds, it's also, when you're selecting those influencers, it's also good to see, do they have a presence on other platforms? Can we leverage Musical.ly along with Facebook and Instagram and YouTube? And I would never see, I personally would never want to do a campaign that solely lived on Musical.ly. I represent a lot of Musical.ly kids, but I think it's smarter for a brand to be cautious of the whole digital landscape as opposed to a singular app. And to my understanding, when you work with Musical.ly, as an example, you have to work directly with Musical.ly if you're a brand. You can't work with the content creator. I don't know, if you're doing a big scale, does anyone know about that?
It's like the early days of Snapchat.
Yeah, and I think Snapchat is dead, so.
That was a bold statement. Do you care to elaborate? You dropped the mic and then you leaned back.
Keep going. It's like a throwaway line, but a big one.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Well, that's a good thing to open up to the panel because I think that response warrants it. Is Snapchat dead?
I think so. I have some friends who are they used to be part of the top 50 Snapchat creators, and they would go to all the summits and things like that. And most of them have either abandoned or used the app as a secondary platform to distribute. I think the reason is, and I think the problem is, excuse me, if you want to look at the future growth and trajectory of an app, look at how easy it is to share and find people on it.
Exactly. You just nailed it. 100%.
Yeah. Snapchat is...
You couldn't find anyone.
It was very difficult. It's very difficult to share your content from Snapchat or to get people to come to Snapchat. Something that Instagram does very well.
Through screens.
Yeah. It's much to the chagrin of people who post on Instagram, but it's very difficult to get people off of Instagram. Right. It's like a big lake that has a bunch of inlets but no outlets. They've just started experimenting with some external links on stories and things like that. But it's easy to share content on Instagram. It's not easy to share content on Snapchat. So that's something to look for, I think.
I think just I'll give a short example. A handful of my content creators were the first top 10 content creators on Vine, and they ran that platform. And when Vine slowly was not being loyal to the people who built their platform, they slowly all migrated their followings to Facebook and Instagram, and now they have 10 million on Facebook, 3 million on Instagram, and they kind of killed Vine because Vine wasn't being, they weren't being respectful to the original people who helped to build their establishment. So I think it's important to identify the key players in an emerging platform, and it could go south so quickly. Right. And I think a handful of my clients were the reasons why that it went down because they stopped creating content. because they felt like they were being treated unfairly in terms of, not being recognized for the first people to build millions of followers, billions of loops. And when they started being ignored by the platform and the platform started focusing on other content creators, it created an environment where everyone was unhappy. And they're like, you know what, we're going to go to Instagram, we're going to go to Facebook. And now Facebook has a monetization program. So Facebook is now allowing content creators to monetize their own content by adding pre-roll in the beginning of their videos. And the amount of views is related to the amount of money they make. So it's actually, they don't need to rely on endorsement deals anymore.
I don't know about Snapchat. I don't have a prediction yet. I appreciate your opinions. I hope, though, that it's not dead. My hope is that I think any competition against Facebook and YouTube is good for the platforms and pushing them and being better platforms, but particularly for the content creators and brands. I think competition is good. The more it gets monopolized into the duopoly, I just think is bad for everyone. So I hope it's not dead. One thing to not forget is that even when Snap was a larger, call it social platform, my understanding is that the vast majority of engagement and traffic was still in messaging, still in one-to-one or one-to-few messaging. I don't think that's gone away. And so now whether they can find a way to monetize that as well as it being a burgeoning and fast-growing true social platform, that remains to be seen. I think that's the real challenge for Snap, but I wouldn't sleep on them completely. I agree it's not the social platform I don't think it was looking to be, potentially, but I wouldn't sleep on them. The challenge is monetizing a messaging platform, which I think it is and still is still strong.
And I will give them credit that in the beginning they did really good job on the branded content page with like having different publishing companies have content. I was definitely a fan of that. All the magazines had like a daily roundup of the digital, and I don't think any other platform has captured a brand in that capacity, and they did a really good job. I just don't think it's somewhere that the eyeballs are living.
One trend I've kind of noticed, and this isn't about a new and emerging app, but a mature and existing one, which is Facebook. And I've installed an extension which Facebook does not like because they have banned you from even linking to it. This is really interesting. It's called Facebook Purity. And if you try to post it in your status update, it's bizarre. I've never seen this for anything else, but a little red pop-up says, this is banned, you can't link to this.
Wow.
But you can still install the extension on your browser. And I highly recommend you take a look at it because it changes the platform in ways that Facebook does not like. For example, it lets you customize your newsfeed. It lets you take out certain stories. It lets you know when someone has unfriended you or deactivated their accounts. These are things Facebook very, very closely guards, right? They don't want people to know this. Now, I have it installed, and I can see, I've seen in the last month alone, a minimum of 2 to 3 people deactivate their accounts every day. And the only time I've ever seen a bump up like that is in the rise up to the last elections, because it was so vitriolic and so acerbic, and everybody hated Facebook and they hated the political bullshit. So people were deactivating their accounts. I've never seen a spike like that until recently, and it's gotten to the point, I think the people in the higher ups at Facebook are a little bit worried about their platform. It's very mature. It's not hip. It's not cool, and it's difficult to do the things that you want to do on the platform. It's difficult to filter your content the way you want. It's difficult to post things the way you want, and the platform seems to be favoring content that is acerbic and vitriolic and a lot of aggregate content. It's just not good. I don't post things on Facebook anymore, and I don't think very many people do. I used to post all my vacation photos, where I was going.
Instagram.
Yeah. Instagram, I think, is the hot new app because it is everything you like about Facebook, which is seeing pictures of your friends and family and their dogs, and without the commentary, without the commentary that gets you in trouble with your friends and family and colleagues. You don't want to argue with your uncle all the time.
Oh, yeah. Well, I ran a quick experiment on Facebook where I said, please comment on this post. Newest post for 24 hours wins a prize. And I'm not an influencer. And it's now at 6,500 comments and has been at the top of every one of my friends' news feeds for 3.5 months. So it shows that, like, if you're getting comments for comments' sake, then they're going to keep pushing your content, and flame wars do that.
Have you lost any subscribers?
Tons. But I'm constantly doing social experiments, so I'm used to losing all my friends and family on Facebook. So
I've seen it every day since you posted it.
Yeah, we're
it's
friends
awful.
on Facebook. Yeah, it doesn't go away. It never goes away.
You're an influencer now.
There we go. It's official. Since we're now officially in the prediction business after the Snapchat talk, I would love to chat a little bit more about where else everything's going. I mean, we've seen huge innovation about what ad units we're using, you know, a strategy based on Facebook and what they've been doing with publishers. But what should people be looking at? Where should people be focusing their attention? And what do you think the biggest growth markets are? There we go.
So, you know, something we've been paying a lot of attention to recently is it's the time well spent movement. And Facebook has written about this on their newsroom blog. If anybody saw the update, Instagram added usage insights to their platform recently. And I think you're right. I think there's a little bit of concern about, like, is it okay to be a platform that is not hip? But the other side of that is also true, which is Instagram and a lot of our research can make people feel like they're sipping on a better life all day. And so a lot of times when you think about your channel mix and your content strategy, just in the same way, all that usage of Snapchat didn't really promise it was going to be here forever. For brands or entertainment publishers marketing on these platforms, you got to think about what is the impression you're actually making. Because it's not really just a numbers game, and we have to think about, yes, we can reach all these people in more convenient ways than ever before, but there is sort of this emerging time well spent movement where people are sick of all the political stuff in their feed. They're tired of envy fatigue on different social platforms. So I think that will have implications for what it means to reach consumers and really build sort of a positive effect in connecting with them.
I would say Twitch and video games. That's huge right now. If anyone in the audience hasn't been to TwitchCon, highly recommend it. Even if you have no interest in video games, even if you have nothing to do with video games, go to TwitchCon. Check it out. The entire place is surging with energy and money and interest and excitement. It is so new and so big. I feel like Hollywood is, we talked about a 3 to 5 year lag for brands. Hollywood is like on a 10 to 12 year lag on Twitch and video games. The average retention rate, there was that Columbia College study that came out that talked about the different retention rate and view times for different styles of videos on YouTube. And they looked at comedy. Comedy is average like 3 to 5 minutes. Beauty blogs, 6 to 8 minutes. And politics, things like that. Video games, average is about 10 to 15 minutes, and that's just pure watch time. People watch that. They're highly engaged. They have money. They're younger consumers. They're very brand savvy. I think that's the thing to watch.
Yeah, I'll second that. Going to TwitchCon feels like VidCon 2012.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're growing a movement here. Like, there's a ton of positive energy. So yeah, it's great.
Something that we think a lot about is international. To your point about the 3 to 5 year lag with brands and culture, I feel like the way that brands view it outside of the, call it, North America, UK, Australia, is maybe 3 to 5 years behind that. And so that's a place that we focus a lot of our time and energy thinking about and talking to folks there, particularly as for brands or even folks, content creators trying to monetize. I don't know about for you, George, but a lot of our film studio, TV network, kind of major media company customers, so much of their viewership is outside of the U.S., 85% of it, and 60% on mobile. And so you get this mobile, international engaged audience that monetizes like crap, essentially. And so that's a huge opportunity. And so I hope the platforms can find a way to solve it first, because they certainly are incentivized to do so. But in general, that's something we think a lot about, is just larger audiences and more connected devices. And it's a big global world, and everyone can see it, really.
Absolutely.
Just definitely agree on the international component. I also think in the brand and media company space, we're going to see a lot more digital-first content. Starting a couple months back, we had a lot of our partners actually, instead of bringing us their TVCs, they would say, why don't you cut the video for our social channels and make it a social first video, and we'll actually use that as our commercial. So that was very interesting. Also, as they try to get into the space of developing content, a lot of them will try and a lot of them will fail, and as a result they'll probably try to acquire more and more digital publishers. We've seen in the past acquisitions in the MCN space, but there's also a lot of pop-up brands like the Cuts and the Scary Mommies that can are digital first native publishers who will most likely be acquired by a larger old school entertainment company at some point.
I have a lot to say.
By all means.
I want to start by saying the reason I have my business and why it's doing so well is because the big agencies like WME, CAA, UTA, they all have digital departments, but they're all so behind. They have a lag because they're run by a lot of executives that don't understand digital and how people consume. It's really important for establishments to enlist people who are obsessed with social media, who really understand it in order to get campaigns done, and I think that goes on the other side of the brand as well. So a lot of my clients don't have success at the digital departments of these big agencies, and I'm sorry if anyone is offended by this, but this is the general consensus, is that these agencies, they have to hit, you know, minimums, and they don't care about 50K deals or less. So when my clients come to me and they want digital deals, there's a big market. So in that market, I'm able to understand what each of my clients' specialty is, and then translate that to Zephyr or Fullscreen when I'm speaking to both of them about digital brand deals. So I'm able to say, this client evokes the feeling that you want to travel to a beautiful location, while this client is really good at makeup tutorials. So I think there's, you need to, obviously, everyone talks about this word authenticity, but I think if a brand can stay true to their authenticity, and so can the influencer, that's when a true campaign, you know, emerges, and digital content and storytelling is something that captures people's attention. I think everyone just wants to feel happy or connection. That's the premise of everything, while you watch a TV show, while you're following a certain person. So I worked on a campaign with Remy Martin years ago called One Life Live Them, and it was just a campaign that I really gravitated towards because they hired my clients and they were able to tell stories about their careers beyond what people knew them for. And it was something where the brand was, they weren't just selling Remy Martin, they were selling this idea that you could be more than one thing. And I think for brands, it's super important to have a message and connect with certain influencers that have a story. And it's important to just be like, okay, this person has 2 million followers, they have great engagement, let's hire them. It's like, no, what are they speaking to their followers about? What is that engagement? Are those people tagging other people? What is the conversation? I think it's really important to just look at these influencers and kind of take a deeper dive into what they're talking about when you're hiring them for campaigns. And I think as a brand manager for digital celebrities and musicians, that's the first thing I do when I speak to a brand. I'm like, this isn't the right person for you, but this person is. And I think that's why it's important to have someone like me advocating their messages. And to wrap it up, I think digital marketing in video content is super important. And having the influencer speak on behalf of a product that they actually use is always going to win. And I think as consumers, people are going to not follow people who are doing brand deals every day because it becomes less. It lessens the message. So I think everyone's becoming more smart, and digital video is key.
One other area of growth I think that people should pay attention to is podcasting. It's really, really growing. The golden era of talk radio has died, but we have this new generation of people who are interested in listening to podcasting, and there's a lot of young and hip voices that are growing in podcasting. And the brands that go to podcast, I was telling the panel beforehand that the average CPM on YouTube these days, like if you're lucky, is $1.50. On podcast, it's $43. And the reason it's so high, and the numbers are relative, there's a huge disparity. So on YouTube, my average video will get 120,000 views in a week. My podcast, though, will get 10 to 15,000 in a week, but they'll still pay $43 CPM because those listeners are much more valuable. They're much more engaged. The average retention rate of my podcast videos are 19 to 21 minutes. Which is just through the roof. And people listen to it longer. It's longer form. You listen to it while you're driving. You get to know the people and personalities. You come to trust them, and they become part of your family. I think that's something to really pay attention to, and that's something that they're doing on Twitch right now. It's an active area of growth.
Yeah, it's definitely worth Googling fandom metrics as it pertains to podcasts because they're bonkers in terms of conversion rate, and absolutely.
I just wanted to add one thing, and I agree. I'm obsessed with podcasts right now, and I think it's a great way to foster a community and really have conversation. And just to wrap it up, I think on the brand side, as someone who represents talent, I think it's really smart for a brand to be like, okay, we want this influencer, this campaign to do this Instagram post, but like what else can we do to involve them in later engagements? Like if that brand's having an event, like have in the contract the influencer needs to go to this event too. It's kind of just creating like a more synergistic, holistic view on using influencers, and I think brands should become more aware that they can leverage these people to become more engaged in their circle, so it goes the opposite way as well. When you just have a person post about one product, there's other ways to keeping, and I think obviously there's a lot of challenges on the brand side, but I think if they can restructure the way they look at these deals and because people can relate to brands on these social pages when they see the longevity of that brand on the page. So I think if the strategy is shifted that these influencers can work more long term, then I think that's like also a win.
Absolutely. Great. Well, we've got a few minutes left for some Q&A, so if anybody has any questions, please raise your hand. Yes, right back there.
So there's this old saying that all publicity is good publicity, so I'm wondering if that's still true, more or less true now in digital, and if you have any particular examples. I know there's this really interesting concept of the content saving brand, but is there any specific examples of a brand taking some kind of unpleasant moment or incident and turning it into a positive by owning it or by shifting the narrative in a very sophisticated way that would serve as an example to the way that brands should handle this situation?
That's a great question.
I'll just respond to the first part of that because that was a great question. I don't have a smart answer for all of it. I hope someone else does. But I think to your first question about is all good publicity good? All publicity good publicity? My personal opinion is I don't think that's the case anymore. Largely, I'm thinking on the spot, but largely because in the old days, when there weren't these social platforms where someone could essentially take whatever publicity that was and then twist and turn it and make it their own, and all of a sudden it's kind of a game of telephone. But it was just awareness, and you sat and you talked to your family about it or around a dinner table, and that was about it. Now, I think that publicity, whatever it actually was, can get twisted into the nth form of it in a snap and turn really ugly really quickly. So I don't think that's the case anymore.
Interesting. Just to follow up on that, like I had never heard of PewDiePie until this happened, right? And then I looked into it, and I kind of agree, maybe there's something there, but now I have. So,
Right.
like, have you seen any kind of like numbers that kind of show?
Oh, on the creator side, I've seen numbers. So
Like
previously I
Logan
was the CEO over at Studio 71, and there was a couple of creators that were unknown until they had a scandal. I'm not going to name names, but there were certain people who have had big press come out that said, look at this terrible person who did this terrible video, and you check back on them 2 weeks later and they have 5x the subscribers they did before the terrible video, and they stuck around. So
Yeah.
I think that it's a real thing on the creator side. On the brand side, I think people like Wendy's are doing like edgy stuff. Like if you see how Wendy's did Roast Me on Twitter, it was beautifully done and they didn't pull any punches, and it was a brand roasting their fans. It was great. But I don't think that they would do the same kind of thing that like PewDiePie would do. Right?
I got an example I just thought of. White Moose Cafe. Perfect example. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but it was I think a cafe in Ireland or something where a vegan went and started complaining that they didn't have enough vegan options, wrote them a bad review, and he leaned into it so hard and said, please, I would like to disinvite all vegans around the world, and just doubled down. And he has this really acerbic personality, and he just, people complain about like certain ingredients or the food doesn't come out fast enough, and he just blasts them on social media, and people love it. I think even Donald Trump endorsed the cafe at one point. It's done very well for them.
Yeah.
Somehow that makes so much sense.
Well, cool. Well, any other questions from the audience? Yes.
What's the platform called?
Blog Talk Radio. Yeah, it's kind of a like a podcasting network, and they have a building where you can go and rent some podcasting hours to record, and they'll have an engineer who will produce your content for you. What's the question though? How are you?
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out like the differentiation between the podcast and putting your attention there as opposed to blog talk. Does
Well-
one have a bigger audience, structured audience? Because podcasts, it seems like if you listen to one on podcast, those they haven't like categorized women and this.
Right.
It's sort of that way with the podcast, but it's just they've been around like most of them.
Yeah. Blog Talk Radio is essentially, I would say, the bridge between traditional radio and podcasting. So I believe they do still broadcast on LA airwaves, and they have live callers that you can do, which a lot of podcasts don't. So that's kind of the connection. But in many ways, it's the same thing. It's very similar.
Cool. We have time for one more question. Yes.
Is there a podcast aggregator that you could recommend?
Ooh.
That does what Blog Talk does, but it's new maybe?
Depends on the platform you use. If you're iPhone, most people use iTunes. There's Stitcher. Stitcher's also another one that everyone really likes to use. There's a Double Twist, a couple of different ones, but I would go with the more popular one, like either Stitcher or iTunes, and then you can look at all the different categories. There's so many really, really great podcasts and great content out there, and you can find some. Just look at the top 10. Usually, the top 10 you'll find something really good. I highly recommend Radiolab. Radiolab's a fantastic podcast. Very informative, very interesting to listen to, very well produced.
I've actually been impressed how often the SoundClouds and the Pandoras of the world now have started embracing podcasts, so they're starting to aggregate.
Oh, yeah, and Spotify, too. It's now Spotify's starting to aggregate podcasts as well. My own is on there, and then SoundCloud as well, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. We are out of time officially, so I'd like to thank all of the panelists, and please find them afterwards if you'd like to chat.